Well, welcome again to the Jerry Reynolds Show. And for those of you that are reasonably observant, I am Jerry Reynolds, and we are coming to you from the wonderful studio here at McCreary's, home of the finest furniture in Sacramento. But you knew that, and so this is really another little interesting, hopefully, podcast with a young man that has a tremendous background in media and basketball, and known for years and always enjoyed. Mr. James Ham.
What's going on, Jerry? How are you?
Not much, buddy. And just a little more background about James. He's currently the NBA insider. Also writes for NBC Sports, which I think for those of you that are aware or not aware, you really need to start reading, James. I mean, I think I just love your stuff. I think it's right on track, most of it. I don't agree with everything. but
on occasion I go south a little bit. It's all right.
Yeah, but I guess before we want to get into, and there's a lot of things, current topics that I want to talk with you about and get your thoughts on. But going back into your career and youth and all that, I know you're basically a native of this area and went to high school in the area. So maybe tell us a little bit about your high school life.
Yeah. I grew up in Grass Valley. I went to Nevada Union, and actually I was never a writer at all. I never enjoyed writing, and I actually kind of feared it quite a bit. I played football in high school. I didn't play basketball. I was too small. I think I was 5 foot tall and weighed 95 pounds when I was a freshman in high school.
Jeez.
I grew 10 inches in high school and an inch after high school, which is funny. My 16-year-old is 6 foot tall, 150 pounds, and he's been that for, a year or two. And, so he's a big boy. He got the early growth genes, but I didn't. I started working at a really young age and just thought I would be a worker bee. I actually helped build the downtown plaza. In 1993, I was a Lather apprentice on the downtown plaza, and then on the Secretary of State's building on 9th and 10th and O&P. My dad is a longtime construction worker, and so I just never really thought of this as like where I would end up at all.
So you really, at that time, you really, say in high school, thought, well, I'll probably go to college and I'll work in some level of the construction industry at that time.
Well, I dabbled a little bit with college early on, but, I got my first job when I was, I think 3 days after I turned 15. And by the time I was 30, I'd worked I worked full time pretty much my whole life at that point. But I got married young. I helped my wife go through undergrad and then law school at Davis. She went to UC Berkeley and then UC Davis and then Davis Law School. We had a couple of kids, and then I went back to school late. I think I graduated in 2008 from UC Davis, but I went to Sierra first and got some classes done, and I just needed some time to have a different perspective when it came to school. And
well, it's great though the way it worked out though, where you could certainly able to help your wife get through school, and then obviously she could probably assist in some ways with you going back too as well. And I think that's pretty remarkable, all the time raising a family and having a family.
When I was at Davis, I had a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and then right before my senior year, we had our second boy. And so I was primary caregiver / student the whole time. And that's where I kind of stumbled into writing. I started writing. I have a degree in history and I have a minor in comparative literature, but I've never taken a journalism course. I just started writing and blogging and hanging out with our friends at Sacktown Royalty. And so my path is very different. But from a young age, I just thought I would be someone who, worked hard. That's kind of what I've always done.
So at what age were you when you, developed a real interest in say sports, Kings in particular? Was there a time when it kind of, you said, this really is interesting to me?
Yeah, I was always a huge football fan from the time I was very young. And then I started watching baseball a lot. I grew up, watching Joe Montana. And, I think my first jersey was a Freddie Solomon number 88. So I was always a wide receiver when I was young, and I always wanted to play football. And then, you start to diversify a little bit. We lived way out in the sticks outside of Grass Valley in a little town called Chicago Park. And, I had a basketball hoop, but it was screwed to a pine tree. So it got a
It
little
would make it
taller.
tough on driving, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and we had gravel. We didn't have, a cement pad or anything. So me and my brother would play on gravel, and so baseball was easier. Football was easier than playing basketball. And again, I was really small, so I never thought of basketball. But I when the Kings moved to Sacramento, I was 10, and it kind of brings you to something. And I know
Well, that's depressing. Wait a minute. You were 10
Yeah.
when the Kings came, and of course I was an assistant coach.
That's right.
So, okay, yeah, well.
Yeah, there's a little age gap there. And then I remember when I was in high school, a couple of the Kings came up to Nevada Union for a football game one night. Actually, I think it was before I was in high school. I was at a high school football game, but they came up to a game to kind of introduce, I think it was Michael Jackson, the guard.
Oh, yeah, Michael from Georgetown, yeah.
Yeah. So he came out,
Great
and
kid.
I can't remember I think it might have been Harold Presley.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
'Cause
So
those guys did a lot of stuff, yeah.
yeah, some outreach stuff. And then I remember I worked at Big A's Drive-In in Grass Valley, which was a modified old A&W. And, we had a car hop and everything else. And
Yeah, I remember those days.
yeah, I would close down, we would close down the restaurant, and then I would have to clean up everything, scrub the grill and everything all night long for another hour after. And I would turn on the radio and listen to the Kings play on the radio. And
I was just thinking that, not to interrupt, but Michael Jackson, really, tell you a story. You may want to hear it. I don't know.
He has stories.
But anyway, Michael Jackson, and I always remember him. He's such a mature young man. He wasn't quite good enough to stay in the league a long time, but he was a backup point out of Georgetown, played on the championship teams, as you know.
Yeah.
But Kenny Smith was our lottery pick at the same time. And Kenny was exactly opposite of Michael. Michael was so mature and everything done. Kenny was just all over the place. A little bit of a dingbat. Wonderful young man, but just, he might forget his shoes, stuff like that. Or
Got
not.
it.
In those days, players had to take care of their own equipment. You didn't have 18 equipment people. And but anyway, make a long story short, I always remember getting upset at Kenny one day because he had was late for the bus, and so we just left him. And which
yeah,
I wouldn't mess around like that if you can't get. But anyway, so he was pouting a little bit, and then I always told him, and Michael Jackson and he were good buddies, and I said, one of these days, Kenny, if you don't change, you're going to be lucky if you get to work for a guy like Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
And of course, now here's the real part of the story that's exactly what happened. Michael Jackson was actually running part of the entertainment and sports part of TNT.
Oh, wow.
For years ago. It goes back about 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, and hired Kenny. That was it,
There it is. Jerry predicted it.
I didn't know it was going to be that big, but
Maybe he should bring him if he gets the Knicks job.
Yeah.
There we go.
Well, there you go. Well, he does owe him, but I mean, it was remarkable, how that did play out, And I always remind Kenny of that, and he'll say, "Yeah, you're right."
That's funny.
But I mean, of course, Kenny has made his own way, and obviously he's turned into a very stable, mature, especially on that show.
Oh, he's
As
great.
You know, he's great, and he's actually the one that actually watches the games and knows what's going on.
Yeah, he's the worker.
Yeah, I mean, with Shaq and Charles, I don't know if they even actually watch the games.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, being in the industry, it's funny to see who the workers are and who the people are that are sports junkies. So even if you look at Grant and Doug, Doug is such a hard worker. I don't think people understand. Doug works
Absolutely.
incredibly hard.
Incredibly hard.
Carries a notebook, and he He's left-handed, and he sits there and he scribes in his notebook the whole time. And he's got all the stats laid out. He's watched Gary Gerald and sort of how Gary Gerald lays out this gigantic portfolio.
He's got a portfolio. Yeah, we've talked about
Incredible.
had Gary on. It's just,
yeah.
I mean, it makes me tired just watching him work.
It does, yeah. And then there's a lineage of that. There's so many people around the Sacramento area or that have been in Sacramento and now, guys like Eric Hasseltimer, guys like Scott, why am I drawing a blank? It'll come to me. But
Senior moment.
Yeah. There are these guys that do the same thing. You see Deuce Mason. He starts preparing for a Stockton Kings game, and he's sitting there flipping out all of this stuff. And Scott Marsh, there we go.
Scott Marsh, yeah.
Yeah, there's all of these guys who does all of the UC Davis games. Jason Ross, who does all the Sac State games. They follow what Gary does.
The Gerald tree, I always call it.
Exactly. So I'm not in that tree. I am a sports junkie. I have been since I was very young. I mean, I'm not
even an acorn laying by the side of the tree.
Yeah. Exactly. But I had baseball cards and football cards and basketball cards when I was young. I study stats, and stats stick in my head, numbers stick in my head. And so I'm also the guy who's there at practice every day. I'm at every single shoot around that's at home, and when I travel, I'm at every single everything. I don't miss. I'm like the clock that the Kings set their day to. They know that when I'm there, it's time for media.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I know few times I go, which is extremely few and getting fewer. But I've always said I used to love practice, and now
you don't have to be there.
I don't have to be there. And I always told Rick Adelman, I said, if I never see another 3-on-2 break in practice, I'll be happy. Yeah. I can live the rest of my adult life without that.
That's funny. Yeah. So I think of myself more as, okay, first of all, I'm saturated with the Kings so much that it's crazy. Like I'm inundated with it. I can't get away from it. My watch is buzzing now. There could be trades. There could be whatever. So there's a lot going on, but I don't prepare like Doug does. I just prepare by writing and doing all the things that I do. And so it's just a different sort of line that we all take, how we prepare for our job. But I think of myself more a little bit like Grant, where I just absorb a lot from watching and listening and having the TV on, and that's how I kind of, do my job.
Yeah, I would say that's how I am. I mean, I have to, honestly, when I'm working with Grant, the few games that I do with him now, I probably prepare a little more than I used to because I need to. But, with the way I look at it, I always kind of, a few notes I might take, it's more in general. That I know this team is weak on this and this team is,
Yeah.
And so as the game, goes on, I know kind of what to look for in case there's issues, and as opposed to just in a few team clear statistics, where this team is, they're at the bottom of rebounding, so in the league, and so even though the Kings are a poor rebounding team, for instance, they should be able to rebound with this team. That sort of thing.
Totally. Yeah, I have again a memory for numbers. So, like we were sitting there the other day, preparing for the show, and the stat hit. I had heard that Karl Anthony Towns hadn't won a game since November 27th.
You're right.
And that's just startling. I mean, he's way too good. I mean, he's averaging 27 and 12.
Yeah, and the numbers are, 50% shooting, 40% from three, 80 from the line. I mean, so obviously...
He's a paper superstar.
Yes.
Yeah, he is a paper superstar, but he cannot win at all, or he's not winning. And it's crazy how... Like the numbers, I don't like walking in with a bunch of numbers. I think they gum up what you're trying to say most of the time when you're on a telecast. Our job is to get in and get out, get to the next subject.
Well, as you know, too, I mean, I always said stats can be, they can be very misleading. It's like the stat of the guy who who drowned in a river that had an average of 1 foot.
Yeah.
Well, of course, he didn't drown where's 1 foot. He drowned where's 10 foot.
Yeah.
So you can make stats say about what you want them to say sometime.
I would agree. And I think, even like this Sacramento Kings team, I think that they did a lot of stat-based analysis coming into the season to build this roster, to add the players that they thought that they needed to build, to add. And I think they relied heavily on stats. And sometimes what you have to do is go out and get really good, engaged basketball players that want to be where you are. And, they're not looking at the paycheck or anything else. They're there because they are basketball junkies and they look at an opportunity to make a team better. And so while they may not fit the exact mold that you need, maybe they're not the stretch 4, the stretch 5 that you need. They bring intangibles that you just can't, really.
I think that's a great point, because I think that one thing I learned early on, and I assumed that when I got in the NBA that every player just loved to play.
Yeah.
And if I come find out, well, no, some of them don't. They're doing it because it's a well-paid job.
Yeah.
And which I understand. I mean, it's no different than anybody in any other field. There are probably lawyers who aren't really happy being lawyers.
I think most attorneys aren't happy. Yeah. Most of them just look at their debt and say, I got to keep doing
this. But
yeah, I know
or like most people.
I have one of those at home.
Yeah, but I mean, so that was a real jolt to me. But I think your point is really right on. If you can get the majority of your players that just really can't wait to get to the gym to practice, to play, and more importantly, to compete, you probably got a better chance of success. Still the overall talent is still
of course,
the main thing.
I have again, my 16-year-old, when he was young, I love baseball. I grew up an A's fan. I absolutely adore baseball. If I had to choose my sports, it's usually baseball first, and then I played fantasy football for almost 30 years, and so I'm really heavy into that, and then basketball's there too. But I was coaching Little League with my son, and I coached for 3 years in Roseville. I absolutely loved it. The kids really responded well, except for one, and that was my kid. I had to fight with him every single day to get his, we'd show up to practice, he wouldn't have his hat, or he wouldn't have his glove, or he wouldn't have his cleats, or he wouldn't have all three. So I would get him a bag, and I would make sure that every single day, you have your helmet, it became such a tedious thing. And I would send all the kids out on the field, and I'd have them run off the field, and my kid is one kid who's moping and walking off the field. And I got to a point where I realized that my love of the game had not translated to his love of the game at all. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's try something different. And he goes, okay. And so we put him in soccer, and he absolutely adored it. I never once fought him about practice ever again. He played competitively for 7 years. He's playing high school soccer right now at Bear River High School. And it's just like he just magically found a lane and just went for it. So my point is that you have to love it. If you're going to be a professional athlete, you should really love it.
Well, and your point's great. I mean, professional athlete or any athlete.
Yeah.
Don't if you don't like it, why do it? I mean, you're supposed to enjoy playing, and certainly, as you say, some kids, baseball's not for me, but soccer will be, or basketball's for me, and baseball both. I mean, you can, but for some kid and parents, I think too, as you pointed out, I mean, sometimes you just because you like something doesn't mean they're going to like it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's great. I mean, because it never works if the kid doesn't really enjoy playing. At some point, it's not going to work.
It's just like my job. I think I know that there are probably 5 million people that would love to have my job. I get it. My job is really cool.
Well, they would until they had to do the work.
But that's the thing. They don't understand that during the season, it's 80 hours a week. And, I show up for shoot around at 10:30. I live an hour away, so I leave my house at 9:15, 9:30 to get to shoot around. And I don't get home until 1 o'clock in the morning. And that's my game day for 41 games at home, and then preseason, and then all of the days coming down for practice. I think it looks glamorous from the outside, but when you get into it, you can't get away from it. You can't shut your phone off. You can't go out to dinner with your wife without worrying about something breaking. I remember I knew exactly when the All-Star game was starting. Me and my family got up. We drove down to Auburn to go to the movies, to go see Lego Batman. I bought popcorn and soda. I sat it down to grab napkins and some straws, and my phone buzzed that DeMarcus Cousins might be traded. So I text right then, had it confirmed while I was still sitting there with popcorn and soda. I walked into the theater, handed the stuff to my wife, whispered in her ear, I got to go. They're trading Cousins. And I left my family in the movie theater, drove home, grabbed my laptop, worked, drove down, picked up my wife and kids, and then raced home and wrote for the next 5 hours. And there's no off button. There's no way to, like we're doing this podcast and the trade deadline is tomorrow. My phone is buzzing the entire time. You can't shut off. And I've told my wife multiple times, if there comes a point where I don't enjoy it anymore, then I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to drag it out for 8 years because I've got to. I'm a smart guy. I can go do other things. But, I love what I do, even though the Kings don't win. I do love what I do, and I hope that passion comes across. And I also have seen many players come through Sacramento, whether it's on the Kings or on other teams, where I know they don't care about their job nearly as much as I care about my job.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
that's really interesting.
I think to me, that's what it's all about. I mean, you got to enjoy it as much as you can. I always recall, when I was in the basketball operations area for years and years and years, and when your day starts at 6 o'clock in the morning with a call from the owner, it's like about this or that. And,
Yeah.
And it wears on you a little bit, and 10 or 11 o'clock at night, you're still talking to media people or trying to answer this or that, and you have no time. Having said all that, though, the ball goes up, still enjoy it. I mean, selfishly for me, it's been mostly fun once I just got to the media part of it. Now the basketball operations, that's a whole different issue. I've always said, to me, people would say, well, what's it like? I said, well, just to me, in summary, get up and take a big bite of crap every morning, and they start there, and deal with it as best you can.
Yeah.
And you're going to be chewing slow all the rest of the day, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
Between agents and players' issues and family issues and owner issues and you're going to get a dose of all of them every day.
Yeah, and that's when there was only like 5 or 6 of you working the whole entire basketball
Yes,
side.
exactly.
And now in today's world, there's so many more people.
Many more.
And I think that doesn't make it easier. It complicates it even more. You're dealing with personality. You're dealing with all of the nuances of running a basketball team. I mean, it's crazy. I always thought that I would love to do that side of it. I would love to get into basketball ops and do that stuff. But the more you get into it, the more you realize that, it's only a matter of time.
Yeah.
Like you're going to get fired.
That's the nature of the beast. And
Yeah.
I've always said I've had every job, and the 2 best ones I had were assistant coach and TV.
Oh, yeah.
And the 2 worst ones was head coach and general manager.
I
mean, really,
yeah.
it's by far. I mean, it's it's just almost like a slow fever. those jobs, but the others as assistant coach, I love because of course in those days you didn't have 10 of them.
Yeah.
And so you had a relationship with players, and you could be the good guy as an assistant. As a head coach, you're still the guy taking guys out of a game and not playing them.
Yeah.
And so I don't care how good a guy or fair you are, it doesn't make any difference. Yeah. But I enjoyed that, and which I get off the topic here, but I always say too, I really think a lot is missed. A lot of in the game today, the head coach, I think, misses a lot by having so many assistants. And I don't want to take anybody's job, but I always thought, as a head coach, one of the things that I thought was important was actually working with the players yourself.
Yeah.
And now you almost don't see any of that.
Brett Brown. That's the one guy that I like around the league that I've seen.
Actually goes out and works with the
Yeah, I
guys.
remember watching one of years ago, Nerlens Noel. He sat out his first year because he had blown his ACL in his last year in college, and he needed work on his jump shot. And I watched 76ers came in, and I watched Brett Brown wouldn't even let him shoot the ball. It was just on building the base, following up, reaching up, just working on the form. And it was a head coach working one-on-one with a young player, investing. And I thought that was really, really interesting to see. I mean,
Yeah, it's great to, I mean,
you
really
see it on
is
occasion, but
on occasion. And of
Yeah.
course, you mentioned Nerlens Noel, and I always think, that was one of those part of the so-called process to where they traded Drew Holiday to get Nerlens Noel.
oh yeah,
Yeah, how brilliant was that?
Yeah.
That's part of the process.
yeah, it's probably a process you want to take back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that's something that like the Kings are going through that right now. You see, their process was to add a bunch of blue chippers and then kind of sift them out and see which one works and which one doesn't. And I mean, if you've ever panned for gold, that you get a whole bunch of dirt and you sit there and you sift and you sift and you sift and
Yeah, you better hope there's a nugget in there somewhere, don't you?
yeah, the gold sticks to the bottom. That's the heavy stuff. That's the stuff that's real. And I think that you're still in the process of figuring out what's real and what's not.
And hope probably know you need some more gold.
Yeah, and you need to go grab another scoop of dirt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Hey, before I forget it though, I always think back of the years kind of when you were first kind of finding your way in the NBA and started your own blog.
Yep.
The I'm trying to the Cowbell Kingdom.
Yep.
Cowbell Kingdom, and maybe if you would go into that a little bit.
Yeah.
Just what got you started into that, and
yeah, it actually started before Cowbell. So I wrote all the time at Sacktown Royalty. I wasn't writing on the front page. There was only like 2 staff writers at the time, but I wrote a lot of like fan posts and stuff. And, you started having a little bit of a following. We got into a lot of arguments, which I thought were great for honing your own argument and sort of focusing on what it is that you're trying to say and picking apart other people's arguments.
they do have some terrific writers on there, or did, and still do. I mean, just really makes you think.
Yeah. So it had been like a long stretch there, and I know the year that Tyreek Evans was a rookie, won Rookie of the Year, 25-5. But that was a really bad season. I mean, the Kings were not good at all.
At all.
Yeah. And so I had taken a break and said, look, I need to take some time off from writing about Kings all the time. At the time, I was a stay-at-home dad. I just graduated from college, but my wife is an attorney, and if I was going to go teach school, we would basically, if you do all the math, I'd make about $7,000 or $8,000 a year, and someone else would raise my kids, or I could stay home and be there, for my wife and for my kids. So I needed an outlet, and I started writing all the time. And I took some time off, and then I came back, and someone reached out to me the second I came back and said, hey, I've been watching you write for a while, and I'm starting a blog network, and I would love it if you came and cover the Kings for me. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And they said, well, it's sort of a choose your own adventure. You get to do whatever you want. You can write from afar. You can try to reach out to the team and see if they'll give you access. And so at first I said no. And then I talked to one of my best friends, and he's like, why don't you do it? You love writing about it. You love talking about it. Like, why don't you just give it a shot? And I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I started just a really basic blog. It was called The Purple Panjandrum. And
The purple what now?
The Purple Panjandrum. It's a
Yeah.
literature reference.
It's
So
over my head. Yeah. Okay.
so anyway, I started doing that, and it was, for me, it was like that one avenue that was missing. It wasn't the conversation piece, because Sacktown Royalty had that.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed the the sort of conversation aspect of that, the way that the comment section worked and everything else. And to be honest with you, I used it as a muse all the time, especially when I was young and just starting out doing this. So I had got about 6 weeks in.
Don't say young in front of a 76-year-old person.
There you go. There you go. In the business.
Okay, there you
go. I had spent about a month working on a bunch of stuff, and like I was churning, and I was starting to get a following, strangely enough. And so I reached out to the Kings and I said, hey, you have Media Day coming up. Is there any way you'd let me come to Media Day? And D-May did not get back to me. Yeah, he ignored me.
Well.
So I reached out again, and he ignored me again. And then finally I reached out one more time because Media Day was like 2 days away. And he said, you know what? I've read some of your stuff. That's fine. You can come to Media Day, but don't get in any trouble. We'll be watching you. And I said, okay, fine. So I showed up to Media Day, and it was one of the strange Media Days at Arco, where, you know, when you come in the doors from the security outside, they did it in that hallway right there.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and they had all these little bins, and they stuffed players, you know, and it was, I remember, I think Donald Sloan and Hassan Whiteside's first year, DeMarcus Cousins' first year. And what I found was that no one was really asking that many questions of the players. And I had spent years interviewing people as a retail manager, and I just felt like, all right, I'm just going to jump in. And I jumped in, and I had a great time. I thought it was fun. I didn't feel like out of my depth at all. And so I reached out to the Kings media relations staff and said, hey, training camp starts tomorrow. Can I come? And again, they didn't get back to me. And then the next
Perseverance, young people.
Perseverance, exactly. So the next day, they did, and they said, "Hey, sorry, we missed your email. You missed the first day of training camp, but go ahead and come on down. We'll see how it goes." And that first season, it was almost instantaneous. Like me and Paul Westphal somehow had a connection right away.
Yeah, as you know, all-time great guy, boy.
A phenomenal human being, absolutely amazing. I'm so happy that he made the Hall of Fame.
Yes, very deserving.
But we had this weird connection right away. And he went to the media relations staff and said, hey, you need to open the door for him. So, and I didn't even know that. So I went through preseason and I started making goals for myself. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to show up to training camp, maybe they'll let me come to a preseason game. So I asked, and I was credentialed. I thought, well, if they're going to let me in a preseason game, maybe they'll let me into a regular season game. And then next thing you know, I'm there for opening night. And it was always it was almost like the Dread Pirate Roberts and Princess Bride. You know, I'll certainly kill you in the morning.
Yeah.
You know, but he doesn't kill him, and he just lets him keep working and working. Yeah. And so they just were waiting for me to screw up. And then they would usher me out the room, but I never did. And next thing I know, I'm 10 years in, and I've been credentialed for every game since that first season. I've missed 2 games ever. One, I was at a Board of Governors meeting while they're deciding the fate of the team in New York. And the other, I was at the Sloan Analytics Conference at MIT.
It was interesting, though, you brought up Paul Westphal, because obviously I didn't realize that he had as much impact, allowing, which is such a credit to him. I always say, as of all the coaches that I've been around with the Kings, from starting in all of them, which I have, but I think Paul was the easiest to deal with, and there's been some great guys, I don't mean that, but he was, and I think sometimes the fans didn't really appreciate his background, he's because I remember there's about a 5-year period where he's one of the 10 best players in the world.
Yeah.
And, absolutely zero ego. You'd never hear it from him. Mm-hmm. And, of course, then going on to the time we traveled together for those years he was coach, I always sit in the very back of the plane. I just like being there, close to the restroom, really.
Yeah.
but on the charter, and of course the coaches would set up in the middle of the plane. But almost invariably, about every flight, Paul would come back, because there's 2 seats, and he'd come, and we'd just talk basketball. Just not just the team or the league. He just, and I really, really enjoyed that because it was just almost an automatic thing. And
Yeah.
he actually asked a question every now and then. And which was.
Yeah, I know. My first year, Kevin Arnovitz from ESPN, he was sort of my pseudo boss, and he said, "How's it going?" I said, "It's great. My relationship's great, but when they go on the road, I just feel disconnected." He goes, "Well, why don't you just ask Paul for his phone number?" And I'm like, "Can you do that?" Like, I didn't understand that you could do that. He's like, "Oh yeah, just like hit him up." It's like, "Hey, there are times when you're away. Do you mind if I text you sometime?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, sure." And he gave me his phone number. And I've gone out here and there with a few coaches and like had, dinners or drinks with a coach here and there. But Paul, like during that, because after my first season was the lockout. So they drafted Jimmer and then the league shuts down right afterwards. And then that first season was also the first relocation attempt to Anaheim.
Yeah.
So I get thrown into the fire of fires. It was absolutely incredible being there, being at city council meetings, all this stuff. And the one thing I just brought this up to Luke just the other day, because, the Kings have been a little secretive with their injury report this year. And then he's getting asked questions about injuries. And he's like, "Look, man, I'm a head coach. I'm not a medical doctor. I don't know what's going on. Like, I get the player back. Until he's cleared, I don't get it." And I said, in my first year, the Kings went through relocation, and Jeff Petrie and the Blue family flat out disappeared. And they left Paul Westphal holding the bag to answer relocation questions in the middle of a season while he's dealing with DeMarcus Cousins as a rookie, losing.
Which was impossible, by the way.
Yeah.
I saw that up close and personal.
And of that team, I told you guys the other night, 7 players from that original team, the 2010-11 Kings, were out of the league in a year. So guys like Lutherhead, Antoine Wright, Darnell Jackson, Pooh Jeter, Dante Green, even Hassan Whiteside was out of the league. All of these guys, they were just flat out gone. That's how bad his roster was. And at the same time, he sat there, I dropped my phone, and had to deal with the relocation stuff. And I didn't know it was anything different. Now you would never see that at all.
Oh, no.
And then they got all the way through that summer. And during that summer, he would do clinics at CalFit where he was teaching fans, their season ticket holders, how to, what offensive and defensive schemes are, all this incredible stuff. And then they fired him, 7 games into the season?
Yeah. And like you say, that roster,
Yeah.
a combination of Greg Popovich, Red Auerbach, and Pat Riley couldn't have won 2 more games with them.
I know.
It's just, it was an impossible circumstance.
I was sitting on the sidelines with him right before a game, and I looked over, and the Utah Jazz were in town. They had just traded Darren Williams. And I said, "Man, look at how bad that Utah Jazz roster is. Like, I had never seen that roster ever look so bad." He goes, like, half the team is like 2nd-round picks. And he looked at me, he goes, "James, have you looked at my roster?" And I've had that roster the whole season. Like, you can't feel bad for Jerry when I've got what I've got. And I'm like, okay, fair enough.
No, I was going to say it was really, I remember talking with Paul, too, about, kind of along those lines, which I think he knew the end was coming and all. And I said, well, just keep in mind, I said, you won 63 games at Phoenix one year with Barkley and those guys, and you're not a bit dumber today than you were then. And he said, no, I said, I wasn't, and like he said, no, I didn't have a whole lot to do with the 63 wins. And I said, I don't think I'm necessarily totally responsible for all these losses. And I said, no, that's the bottom line in the NBA.
Yeah, he was a great first head coach for me. He really did help me. And we would go out to lunch and sit there and just talk basketball. He's got incredible stories, stories about the old Celtics when he was there, stories from, his time as a coach in Phoenix, and just crazy things that happened. And they actually had a guy who had his girlfriend killed on the roster. And sat there.
I remember we talked about that.
Yeah, he just had to sit on the end of the bench because he had a guaranteed contract and he never got indicted, so there was nothing they could do about it. And it lasted for over a season, and then finally they said, fine, we'll just bite the $3 million, which was a lot of money at that time, and just pay the guy out. Just absolutely crazy stories, even from his time coming up. And, he worked at, what was it, Grand Canyon University? Where is it that Dan Marley's at?
Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know.
But I think it was before it was Grand Canyon. It became Grand Canyon. But maybe I'm wrong.
The only place I remember him coaching college was Pepperdine.
No, he coached.
He coached. No, he did
small
coach at
Christian
Yes,
college.
he did coach at Grand Canyon before going to
Yes.
the Phoenix Suns.
Exactly,
Yes, yes,
exactly.
exactly right. And they went from being like a college division when he coached there
Yep.
to now they're a major with Dan Marley. You're
Yeah,
right.
exactly. And the reason they were able to build their arena was that he had a relationship with Don Imus, and Imus started running like a fundraiser on the Imus show and raising money for them to build their arena, which they did. There's a great story about a kid that, he had a big station wagon. So they went to him and said, hey, do you want to be on the team? Because you have a station wagon and we don't have a team bus.
Oh, really?
And so he drove everybody around. He never got to play. He didn't care. He'd show up. He'd have a good time, hang out. They get to the final game of the season. They're in the playoffs. And 2 of their guys foul out. They only had a 7-man team.
And the station wagon guy got to play?
Station wagon guy got to play, hit 2 free throws and won the game. They carried him off.
Oh, that's like
yeah.
Hickory almost.
Yeah.
Of course, I always remember being a small college coach that we bought a station wagon.
Yeah.
Not that we would have as a family, but we bought a station wagon. So on some of the road trips, that'd
Yeah.
be one of the vehicles we'd take. That's just part of the business. But now I have to say, getting into your job as an NBA insider, obviously, and your writing as an NBA insider, basically a lot of it is Kings related, but
Yep.
not but the NBA also is a real part of the focus.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think the one thing that I found that like over years of doing this is, number one, I like sources. You hear us say sources all the time, right?
Yeah.
NBA sources, league sources. It's always masking who it is that we're talking about. I'll just say that the one thing I've learned is that you don't really have sources, you have relationships. And so I think you and I, you understand, that's what I do. I walk into a room and I don't intentionally do it, but I just start building relationships left and right. It's just
Sure.
kind of the way I'm made. And so I think over the years, that's something that I've been able to get better and better and better at just realizing that aspect of it, that people give you information all the time, but you never thought of it as, source information, when most of the time it is.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time we know about 500 times more than what we can write about. And most of the time we know about 3 times more than what the team thinks we know when they're having conversations with us.
Sure.
So I don't know. I like an NBA insider. I'm there every day. I think that's the other. When I go talk to high school groups and stuff, or I talk to people, reach out and say, hey, I'm in college and I could use some advice. My couple of things is, number one, show up every day. Showing up every day, be professional. Number two, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. I think that's something that I think people were caught off guard by me early on in my career. Why do you dress so nice? And it's because I'm presenting myself the way I want to be seen, and people don't always do that.
First impression.
Yeah. And not only that, but show up every day that way. There shouldn't be a day where you look like you just, drank about 8 too many and showed up. You can do that, but you can't look that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for me, some of these things, treat everybody with a ton of respect. I walk down the hallway and I memorize everybody's names. And, I say hello to every security guard. And,
I do too, except I forget them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
the difference between being 76 and being 44.
Yeah, that's really embarrassing,
You know what, though? I found me and my wife, we were at an Ed Sheeran concert at Golden One, and our friend somehow got the most incredible seats of all time. We were literally front row. There was no one between us and the stage. And so we were sitting there just watching, standing up.
By the way, if you had a beard, they might confuse you too.
Yeah,
Ed
there you
Sheeran.
go. I could be Ed Sheeran. There we go. So I'm sitting there, and this lady comes up behind me and starts yelling at me. And I had no idea what she was yelling about, but I guess behind me and my wife, there was a lady in a wheelchair over to the side. And this lady was saying that we had moved over in front of her. So I went over and made sure that we were okay with the lady in the wheelchair. She's like, I don't even know why that lady's yelling at you. I don't know who she is. Anyway, the point of my story was the second that lady came up and got in my ear, all of my security people came rushing out around and like, what's going on? Like ushering away this woman. And I realized then that all those times that I walked down the hall and I knew everybody, they also knew me, and they were like instantly, James, what is happening? Why is she talking to you that way? And it was kind of validating that, on occasion.
Of course, conversely, if they all came over and started beating on you, then you had made the kind of impression that you
that I had done poorly. Very true, Jerry. Yeah.
Before I want to get into a couple of things here.
Yeah.
Just some thoughts. I know how much you watch the league and follow everything, and kind of get your thoughts on basically number one is what team or teams do you think are serious contenders for the NBA championship this year, and maybe why?
Okay. We're taping this the day before the trade deadline, so I think the trade deadline can actually change a few things, which normally I don't think that it can.
Generally not.
No, but I think that there are a couple of teams that are very close to being really strong contenders, that if they could add one or two pieces that aren't major pieces, but that fit the role that they need, that I think could elevate themselves. So I think right away, I think clearly the Lakers are going to be a huge, huge favorite to win. I think everything, especially with the Kobe news, I think that they're going to dedicate, it might be canned, it might be Hollywood, but at the same time, I think they're going to really try to be, they're going to use that as motivation throughout the rest of this year. And they have so much talent, it's ridiculous. But I think the Clippers are a team, to me, that if they can add one or two solid veteran pieces, could really, really take that next step and be great this year, especially the way that they've sort of rested Kawhi and Paul George the whole time. But, I'll bring up a guy like Nemanja Bjelica. I think if you put him on that team and his ability to shoot and stretch the floor, and he's playing 20 minutes a game and giving you high-level competition, I think that helps that team get better and maybe even makes them a contender. I know that sounds crazy that Nemanja Bjelica could change somebody into a contender, but at the same time, his skill set adds an
Don't
element.
you think they're a contender anyway?
I think they're really close to it.
Because they've beaten the Lakers head-to-head twice.
Yeah, they beat them, but it's different when it's the playoffs.
Well, I know,
Yeah.
but I'd say that for that very reason is that, they've got, I ain't saying they're more talented, but they've got plenty of talent. And like I say, head-to-head, they have beaten them.
Yeah.
And pretty convincing.
No, it's very true. I think the one other team in the West, especially with the Capella trade, I don't think Houston, to me, is a contender because
No, I don't either.
You're going to run a 6'5" center out against Anthony Davis and JaVale McGee, and then they go with Dwight Howard off the bench. I don't even, and you've got Rudy Gobert in Utah. You've got
Denver.
Jokic. Yeah, you've got Jokic.
Yeah.
How are you going to stop any of those teams? And you can do all this speed stuff that you want, but at the end of the day, you got to be able to stop somebody too. But it's my other team that I would say that kind of stands out is Utah in the West. I don't think that Conley's played well. I don't think that Jingles has played particularly well. But there's going to come a moment where the real playoff season begins, about 20 games left in the season. And that's when I think that team is going to start plugging away, and you're going to start going, okay, maybe they've got something. I like Denver's roster, but I don't think they're a contender. I don't think Houston. And then, a lot of the other teams down below. And in the East is about as wide open as we've ever seen.
Yeah, I think, they're obviously Milwaukee because of a great player they have. And I still kind of think with Boston, if they could get just a little help, I still like their overall talent base.
Yeah.
Maybe better than maybe anybody.
Yeah.
But
they're deep.
But they need some more size, I think.
I think so.
And like say with Milwaukee, to me, it's amazing how they can have the record they have. I just don't honestly think. I think they're extremely well coached and they have a great player. But when you look at their roster and compare it to, like the Bulls of years ago, the other kind of 70-win teams caliber, I don't think they're anything close to, the Warriors,
No, of course
the Bulls, even the late 80s Celtics type thing, where they basically Hall of Famers everywhere. Whereas the Milwaukee, you got one.
I think it speaks to the first of all, the Eastern Conference isn't great, and the bottom of the West is really bad. Mm-hmm. So it allows you to be that good, but also focusing on one game at a time, having a good team culture. You see them doing their crazy WWE stuff before the game where they're all jumping on each other. I'm surprised they didn't take a substantial step back when they lost Malcolm Brogdon.
Me too.
Because I just think he's wonderful.
I do too. I think it'll show up in the playoffs.
It probably will, because I don't think that you can rely on Eric Bledsoe to be like the guy running the show. And of course, Giannis is going to have the ball in his hands most of the time anyways, and we're seeing him elevate. But the rest of the East, I would say Boston. I really like Boston, but I'm not a huge fan of almost anyone else. I think Philadelphia put together a great starting five, but have absolutely nothing behind it.
Well, and I don't know that their starting five even fits.
Yeah. No,
I mean,
I agree.
I really see, I really see slippage there with Embiid. He's gotten bigger, maybe lazier.
Yeah.
Simmons is terrific, but he still can't shoot.
Yeah.
And again, playoffs change. I mean, in other words, on a game-to-game basis, regular season,
losing J.J. Redick is a big deal for that team.
Big deal for them.
I
think that was a huge mistake for them. And of course, the two outliers in the East, Miami and Toronto.
Yeah.
And and that's not even counting Indiana, which if Victor Oladipo, who's been terrible since coming back.
Yeah.
But he's not. He's
going
to
get
yet.
Yeah.
He's going to get better, and he and. To me, that team could be, they basically an overachieving kind of team.
I like them. I like those teams, but I don't
as far
think
as
they
winning
can win it. Like I don't think Houston can win it.
No.
Just like I don't think that some of these other teams in the
I think there's only three that probably could, and that's the two LA teams and Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, I think it is down to that, and barring an injury or something to a team specifically like Milwaukee, where if they lose Giannis, where do they go? I mean, there's no way to replicate. I mean, Middleton's a good player.
No. I mean, he's an excellent player, but and I would say that if it wasn't for Giannis, he might not be as excellent as he is.
Yeah.
I mean, he perfect fit.
Yeah.
But so and now I guess another little question. If you had to say middle of the year, past middle of the year, but an MVP, who would you be some of the top two or three that you see in the league right now?
Man, I mean, Giannis is always going to be there. If Portland was winning, if they were, Lillard, what he's done over the last 2 weeks,
he's put up Steph Curry at his best numbers kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, and even some of his bigger, he had the string of, I think it was 51, 47, and 61.
Yeah, average 48 for a string of games.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that we really haven't seen from a small guard ever.
Yeah. So I think he's been incredible, but of course they're not winning. I think LeBron needs to be considered.
Sure.
I mean, could he have won an MVP without AD? The answer is no. But maybe there's a possibility now that he can. And outside of that, Kawhi doesn't play enough. Paul George has missed a bunch of games.
Yeah.
James Harden is great at what he does, but
nobody likes what he does, but he's really great at it.
Yeah. I mean, I've gone on the air and said I just can't stand.
No, it's hard to watch. But I think he probably deserves consideration.
He does deserve consideration,
but I wouldn't put him ahead of LeBron or certainly Antetokounmpo at all.
And what was it? We saw the stat last year. I think it was there were multiple games where he dribbled over 450 times in a game.
Well, I was going to say
That's crazy.
I'd be one of those guys. Wonder they ought to put a bomb in the ball after 4 dribbles. It explodes. I think it'd be better
or
for the
at least
whole
gets paint all over you or something.
for the whole league. I think would improve things.
Yeah.
But he's I don't know. I mean, but other than that, it's hard to see you know,
Yeah.
who could be legitimately considered MVP caliber, I think.
Yeah, I don't think that they're.
I mean, I think with Luka Doncic, I don't think he's
not there yet.
Not there yet.
He's
You know,
close.
he's had a marvelous
He'll
year.
win MVPs.
But
Yeah.
he's, you know, you can't put him ahead of those guys.
No,
by
I
any stretch.
I love watching him play.
And I still, you know, in fairness, I mean, you know, Dallas is you know, I mean, I think Rick Carlisle has almost as much to do with that success as Luka.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's just one of those, much like Eric Spoelstra. You know,
Yeah, Spoelstra is incredible.
You know, where you have, and maybe, you know, now that we're talking about, maybe the best coaching job is being done in Toronto.
Yeah.
I mean, who thought they would have, you know, losing Kawhi, they'd be where they are?
Yeah, and
nobody.
And Siakam is a late first-round pick that spent a ton of time.
And they've
in
lost
the G
a
League.
ton of games to injury.
Yeah, yeah.
And hasn't, you know,
They've
I
got
mean,
a lot
so-
of decisions too this offseason. I know I think that team could even take a further step backwards as far as Gasol and Van Vliet are free agents. Serge Ibaka is a free agent. So
yeah, no, there's going to
it should be
some
interesting.
interesting things
Yeah.
there. How they can, if they can keep that team together and
Yeah.
and the whole bit. Of course, that the nature of the beast today is every team.
No,
You know. I mean, it's so different. You know, to where every free agency is what it is, and it's good
Yep.
for the players, but in some ways, it's not as good for fans, and especially fans because it's just in all sports. You know,
it
you
takes
get
away from it.
Takes away from it, but
Yeah.
well, you know, we didn't. One of these days, we've got to have you back because we want to maybe after the season's over and we can go over. But I really, you know, I think it was great that fans could see a little bit about what it is to be James Ham, and you can't go ham until you're James Ham. And I always say, you know, so many people, young people, they see something and think, well, I would like to do that. Well, that's fine, but there are steps to get there. And you know, and I always hear fans saying, well, you know, they would like to do Grant's job. You know, it's like, well, you better get some education, and you better, I mean, and doesn't, you know, you don't just go get walk up in front of the TV cameras and there you are, you know, and I think that's part of the deal, you know, is preparation and perseverance and hard work, and that'll give you a chance. Doesn't mean you'll get there, but it'll give you a chance. So
And just know that if you do get there in Sacramento, I'm going to outwork you. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to have to deal with that.
I know that.
It is, I mean, yeah, I'm going to show up every day, and I'm going to expect that you show up every day.
I've ridden many times with him down to the studio in San Francisco. and
I drive fast.
yes, he does. Yes, he does.
Yeah, that and I would say this too. None of my success and probably none of your success would have ever happened if we didn't have the support of the people behind us.
Oh, that goes without saying.
Yeah,
if you don't
my
have
wife is absolutely amazing, and she's let me be, you know, chase windmills.
Well, I always go back to it with my wife, and of course, you know, during the early years, you know, where I'd bring home uniforms to wash and practice gear to wash. And we'd take the baby on the road recruiting trip, and with $5 a day per diem and the whole bit. So if you don't have that, if you don't have somebody, you know, supporting. And of course, my classic though, before I get off the thing here, is we got married December 23rd, and on the 4th we went to a high school holiday tournament because I was recruiting. So I said, so she knew right away, you know, how it was going to be.
This is the drill. This is the drill. We're in Cancun, and I pull my podcasting mic out of my suitcase, and I have a podcast from Cancun while we're on vacation.
I bet your wife won't take that microphone and put it somewhere else.
That's the life. It's the life that, you know, that you get into, but it
sound like a mobster. It's the life we chose.
It is. It's the life you choose. It's the commitment that you have to it if you want to be good at what you're doing, and if you want people to listen and stay tuned in and, you know, watch on the TV.
Well, on that note, and it is the life we've chose, and I really enjoy and appreciate James coming in here. Have utmost respect for him and what he does and our friendship. So again, thank you for watching, and till next time.